My head snapped up. "What was that?" My climbing instructor and best friend Jenna said, "Sounded like a mountain lion to me." "You didn't say there were mountain lions out here," I told her, sounding nervous. I looked over my shoulder, towards the source of the sound. "What if—" She clapped her hands together. We were standing on a flat ridge along the side of the mountain. It was the middle of winter, but the skies above us were totally clear, and there was no sign of any snowfall in the coming days. Still, whenever the wind blew, it carried with it an undeniably sharp chill. Even bundled up in our winter workout gear, I was cold. The harness was already fixed about her waist. The tip of Jenna's nose was bright red from the cold. Her ears were hidden beneath the flaps of her hat. Nope, we're not gonna freak ourselves out talking about something that isn't an issue. We're 10 minutes from camp, at a literal approved campsite, and there have been no reports of mountain lions actually bothering people in the region. "Right," I said, "but it's the off-season, and there's no one else at the campsite. Don't animals always come out in the off-season?" Jenna grabbed hold of the rock face with one hand. With the other, she reached over her shoulder and gestured at me. "Are we doing this, or what?" I looked up at the rock facing. My brother was an avid rock climber. I was supposed to do one climb and then drop his ashes at the top. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, we're doing this." It was hard. I had done some practice runs in the city, of course, but they didn't have the wind and icy rocks. The climb left me exhausted. Jenna and I made our way up to a high ledge, and then she helped me perch there and dig the urn out of my backpack. "You would have loved the view," I said. It was undeniably gorgeous. From up here, I could see the pine trees in the distance and the way that they swept over the land like a dark green blanket, in waves that almost swayed beneath the force of the wind. "Dylan would have been proud of you," Jenna told me. She reached out, very carefully putting a hand on my shoulder. "You know that, right?" "I don't need anyone to be proud of me," I said. "I just want to make sure that his final wishes are respected. He wanted his ashes dumped in the place he loved best." "The mountains," said Jenna with a nod of her head. "I know. Dylan would have lived out here if he could have managed it. He loved this place." I let out a shuddering breath and opened the top of the urn, then tipped it out. The harsh, blowing wind caught on the soot and swept it off, over the curve of the mountainside. Soon, there was nothing left but the empty glass container. Tears burned at my eyes. I hadn't spent nearly as much time around my brother as I should have, and losing him brought up this ugly realization that once time was gone, that was it. It was gone for good. There was no way to turn back the clock and spend more time with him. There was no way to answer all of the calls that I had previously missed. I could never get back what had already been lost. And now that his ashes were dumped, there was literally no way to physically do something with him again either. We sat there in silence for a while, though Jenna eventually urged me to put the urn back up and make the climb down the side of the mountain again. Down there at the bottom, we took another short break, and then started on the 10-minute walk back to camp. It seemed to go faster on the way home than it had on the way there. Maybe because I was more excited to get into my tent than I was to get into the mountains. Maybe because the urn that I was carrying back had already been emptied. Lighter in my bag, but lighter in my heart, too. As the grounds came into view, Jenna teased, "See? I told you that we would make it back without any problem. And no mountain lions to be found either." "You spoke too soon," I told her, pointing toward our campgrounds. The grounds themselves were state-maintained, a large clearing in the middle of the pine forest, with lots of room for tents and fires. There were several state-maintained trash bins in the campground, all of which had been knocked over. Our bags had been pulled out of our tents and shredded. Something with massive claws had ripped into the heavy canvas, tearing it up. Jenna swore and ran to check our supplies, while I looked around to try to make sure that the mountain lion was gone. Red on the ground caught my attention. I made my way after the trail, towards one of the nearby trees at the very edge. An obscene amount of red had spilled onto the frostbitten ground. It was actively drip, drip, dripping down onto the puddle. The blood puddle. It was cold enough out that the blood on the ground had started to congeal already, but the fresh blood was still dripping freely. That meant it must have been a fairly fresh injury. With my heart in my throat, my gaze slid up over the course of the tree to meet the branch above. And there, hung up like a piece of meat to drain, was the mountain lion. Its guts had been totally ripped out, the once pretty pelt gone tacky with blood. Its bottom jaw had been ripped clean away from its body, and half of its head had been crushed in. I opened my mouth, but was so struck with fear that I couldn't even scream. Jenna didn't have that problem. I thought that she had seen the dead mountain lion too. But a second, more frantic scream ripped through the air, followed by the guttural, ape-like grunting of a creature. It was the same roar that I had heard earlier in the day, only this time, it was much, much closer. Turning to look behind me, I was met with the sight of a 9-foot-tall behemoth. It wasn't a man, though it had 2 arms and 2 legs. It was covered in fur from head to toe, and its face resembled that of an ape or boar. Short tusks jutted out from under its top lip, and beady yellow eyes were staring at me. There were no doubts about what it might have been. Sasquatch. One bloody hand was clamped down over Jenna's back. She had been thrown over the Sasquatch's shoulder and was frantically kicking her legs and pounding her fists against the monster's back. Her strength was nothing compared to the Sasquatch, though. It felt like I had been frozen. Cold gripped me. Every joint and muscle in my body went totally stiff. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I was again voiceless, unable to even scream, let alone try to do anything of use. Then again, what could I have done? That was a question that would haunt me. This was a creature that had easily killed a mountain lion and was truly massive compared to me. I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I didn't think that I could, at least. In the moment, I stood there, watching as the Sasquatch grunted and growled, baring its teeth at me. It was clearly warning me from coming any closer. Jenna screamed, beating her fists against the monster's back. It did nothing. Then the beast turned and vanished into the tree line, taking Jenna with him. She looked at me, tears pouring down her frightened face. Our eyes met. She screamed my name, begging me to do something. But what could I have done? Nothing. I stood there, and I watched as the Sasquatch carried her into the darkness of the forest, leaving me there in the campgrounds, alone, by myself, terrified. My legs gave out and I collapsed. I stayed there all day, certain that the monster was going to come back for me. But it never did. I don't know if the Sasquatch was ever spotted again, but I know that Jenna was never found. Not even her body. Not even a bloody scrap of clothing. The rangers said that a mountain lion took her. But I know what really happened. And so do you now. That's why I need you to answer this question for me. What could I have done to help? Nothing, right?
Subscribe today or beware.